What's up everyone, John from ARTV. It is time for another throwback review. It's actually been a little while since I've done one that wasn't just for a band that was releasing new material or a random album or something like that. So I wanted to do that, and it got in my head this past week because I was in a stream with the rock critic. He was celebrating hitting 10,000 subscribers. I will link that stream down below if you're curious because I was there. News, rock, reviews, there were a lot of people there that I think you guys might know. But we were randomly kicking around Evanescence, and I was like, I haven't listened to them in a while, number one, and we were talking about this very record, Fallen, and I was like, you know, I'm not as familiar with that as I thought I was. And it's actually been over a half a decade since I had sat down, listened to this album in full. It came out in 2003, and Fallen was super successful. It's over 7 times platinum in the United States alone, and it was kind of the beginning of the end for them in a way. They hit their peak so early, and then it took them 3 years for a follow-up, and then another 5 years after that, and now we are still waiting for more material here in 2017. It's been like 6 years at this point, and it's getting a little bit ridiculous because the band is getting a lot older, and there have been so many shifts, and obviously famous shifts in like the band members. Ben Moody left just 5 months after this huge album Fallen came out in 2003. They were the 2 founding members, Amy Lee and Ben Moody, and there was a big falling out there. He's since forgiven her and the rest of the band and wishes them well, but it was kind of turmoil, and I think that definitely got channeled into the writing on The Open Door in 2006. But who knows what Evanescence would have been if they had all stuck together and if things had gone much smoother. So we'll see what happens in the future for them. But today, let's talk about their 2003 debut that landed them so many milestones, Grammy nominations, various music video awards, and that sort of thing. They've pretty much been meme-ified at this point with Bring Me to Life, the single that you can't escape, especially the Wake Me Up part. It's so nu metal, it's so 2000s. Is this a cliche album, or is it something worth revisiting? And I have to say that it is worth the revisit. Listening through this, there's some songs that are a lot of fun, and there's some that are very similar, very predictable, but at the same time, they have that quality and urgency to them that are almost kind of like a beginner's guide to getting into maybe something more like alternative metal or goth metal or even some symphonic stuff, because there are strings aiding some of these tracks, including the big power ballad, which was called My Immortal. That's a big one, and I actually prefer the band version, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So obviously they released some big singles like Bring Me to Life, Going Under. They pretty much dominated the rock and alternative charts for a long time. They were all over mainstream and rock radio, which was a hard feat to accomplish. They were one of those bands that really stood out at the turn of the century. A lot of people were into boy bands and other pop acts like maybe Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears at that time, but they stood out as an alternative to that, and I think a lot of kids latched on, and for good reason. A lot of this is actually pretty solid stuff. Since I've never reviewed an Evanescence album before, I'll give you a little bit of backstory in terms of how I feel about them. I think that the best and most distinct part of their music is obviously Amy Lee as a vocalist. She has this towering voice that can either penetrate with emotion or else anger, and you feel what she feels because she has that quality to her voice. She can hit the higher notes and she can go down in a lower register as well. You see that on Going Under, the opening track, that she's in that lower tone before soaring into that chorus. And the band clearly has a knack for doing that. They have a bunch of soaring hooks here, whether it be Haunted, which builds up with suspense, or even My Last Breath, which builds up with a little bit of that electronic flair. I like that it puts that out there and that they have different styles. Evanescence have a very distinct sound to them. They have the chugging guitars and then that kind of backing bass, those drums that kind of pound and make it sound more like an epic movie soundtrack song or something like that in places. And they also have, like I mentioned before, the symphonic element to them that add a sense of urgency to these tracks that definitely wouldn't have hit as hard if they didn't have that featured. In terms of Fallen, I think that the musicality is the number one thing that I focus on, but you also have to pay attention to the lyrical content, and it's actually quite solid in places, like the ballad Hello, for example. It's something that covers a very very, very serious topic. They've also talked about like the 9/11 terrorist attacks, at least in terms of the inspiration for the record, and it might translate loosely whenever you're listening through these songs, but those feelings can definitely be felt, and I think Hello is one of the strongest ones. It's actually talking about Amy Lee's childhood sister Bonnie that passed away when she was only 3, and how Amy Lee found out whenever she was only 6 herself on a playground, and it's really stripped down. It maybe feels a bit jarring in terms of jumping from track to track because you're in between Taking Over Me, which is a very catchy, and your face kind of more rocking symphonic jam, and then you switch over to Hello, and then you switch gears back to My Last Breath, which does kind of start off with that electronic switch, but it's actually quite cool the way that it does fit in here. Even if it stands out, I think it stands out in the right way. The same could be said for My Immortal as well. Even if it's the piano version, which I prefer the band version, it's still very strong, and that one is maybe the more emotional in a way, but I actually relate to the band version a bit more because it feels like you're feeling all of these things, and then whenever the rest of the band kicks in at the end, like the final chorus, the guitars, the drums, and then the soaring vocals from Amy Lee, it's super powerful, and honestly, I'd be lying if I didn't say it's one of my favorite songs of the 2000s. Fallen definitely has plenty of bombastic moments, some of them a bit more forgettable than others, but a two-piece combo that I really find to be quite great comes in the form of Tourniquet, a song about suicide and wondering what happens in the afterlife if you can still be a good person if you do kill yourself, which is weird to think about, but a tourniquet is something that is apparently used to compress or to cut off the circulation, I believe, to a body part or an organ, maybe to stop the bleeding, but here it's kind of used in a different way. I really didn't even know that before researching it this past week, and it was something that I was like, how do I listen to a song that many times and I just don't know? But that, along with the track that comes right after that, Imaginary, are an epic combo, really just transitioning flawlessly from one song to the next. I think it's probably my favorite part of the record. Even the next song that comes after that, Taking Over Me and Hello, those are great follow-ups that come right after and add different feelings for sure, but at the same time, it's probably the best stretch that this record has going on. Obviously, some would argue that the opening part that contains the singles would be a better step or maybe a better starting point for new fans of Evanescence, and I could see that, but really once you start to get into this record, I think that the deep cuts have maybe a bit more to offer, but if you want choruses that you can't resist, I can't deny that the singles are a great starting point. I of course have to mention Everybody's Fool, a fan favorite over the years, and I can understand why. It does have that cool opening acoustic guitar, but I feel like the chorus sounds a little bit too samey in terms of the other stuff that's offered here, and I could say obviously similar things for a couple of these other songs, even the closer Whisper, which definitely makes itself feel like it was made for a movie with those big, overly dramatic vocals that come in. It is one of the hardest rocking songs here in terms of like the guitars, the fast-paced drums, and that sort of thing, but that's not always exactly what I'm looking for as the listener, especially looking back to an album like this. It just feels a bit more middle of the road. To all my younger viewers out there who have no idea what this album is, maybe even who this band are, I have to say it's worth checking out at least a few songs. I'll put a link to the album Fallen on Spotify in the description down below if you want to go stream it, try a few of the songs for yourself, maybe shuffle around, see what works for you. I'll put my favorites and least favorites in the description as always, and if you are remembering this album with nostalgia in your eyes and in your mind, like myself, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Does it still hold up? Do you come back to this often, or do you find it a bit more tedious and forgettable at this point? I'd have to say that I do feel positively about it for the most part, but a lot of it runs together in my mind. So I have to give this album, Fallen, their debut that was so successful, really just a game changer at the time, a 3.5 out of 5. If you're able to support me on Patreon on a monthly basis, click that annotation right over there in the corner of the screen. If you'd like to see another throwback review, click right here, or another recent video that I did right here on ARTV, click right there. All of my social media is in the description, and other than that, I'll see you for more videos right here on ARTV very soon.